So in the past, whenever I've been filming these here videos, typically speaking, I do rankings last. And so usually the structure of these videos is that I give a little bit of background about the album, I talk about the album itself and some of its themes, and then I rank it at the end. But today we're switching things up because we are talking about Disintegration, which is the best album The Cure ever released. Disintegration goes straight to the top of the rankings list. It is #1, never to be dethroned. And just so we're clear, I think it is possible to make a record that is better than Disintegration, but I don't think it's going to happen. Disintegration is, quite simply, absolutely amazing. It's breathtaking and enthralling, and it combines everything that you love about The Cure into one package. And it really is quite startling to me to think about how big of a jump it was to go from Kiss Me, Kiss Me, Kiss Me to Disintegration. Because don't get me wrong, that record's awesome, The Head on the Door is awesome, The Top is awesome, Pornography, 17 Seconds, Faith, Three Imaginary Boys, all of these are awesome records, but Disintegration is next level. There's something about Disintegration that is so absolutely amazing, and I think that really what it is that it feels like a fully realized piece of art. Whenever you talk about the idea of perfection, people will oftentimes get nitpicky and say, oh, nothing's perfect. And sure, maybe that's the case, maybe that is the nature of perfection, is that it can never be reached. But I think that aside from a single technical flaw that I'll touch on in a bit, I don't think there's anything I would change about Disintegration. So in 1987, the band released Kiss Me, Kiss Me, Kiss Me, and that was the album that kind of helped them blow up in America, right? Just like Heaven was a major hit. And so The Cure, this band who not even 10 years ago were playing small pubs in Britain, suddenly they were a massive, huge pop band. And I think that's kind of the right way to think about The Cure, honestly, at this point in time, is they were a pop band. They were a new wave band. They made pop music to dance to. And yeah, they had made records like 17 Seconds and Faith and Pornography, of course, but that hadn't been what they were doing. If I had to guess, I would say that at this point in time, people probably thought of stuff like Let's Go to Bed or Push or The Love Cats, Just Like Heaven, that sort of stuff whenever they thought about The Cure. And I'll acknowledge that I am guessing, I don't know for sure if that's what people thought of, but it's my understanding that at this point in time, 17 Seconds was not exactly some super huge record that blew up whenever Just Like Heaven blew up. And so long story short, the band were really big. And I think Robert Smith falls in with a lot of rock stars who achieve some huge amount of success and they realize they don't want it, like Kurt Cobain. People who didn't even really like The Cure were going to Cure shows, and I think that freaked out Robert. And so that's where The Cure as a band were, but Robert Smith, the lead singer, the mastermind behind the band, of course, at this point in time, it should be noted that he was rapidly approaching his 30th birthday. And as I touched on in previous Cure videos, age has always been an issue for Robert Smith. If you look at The Head on the Door, for instance, there are all these references to age and like Sinking and Push. And so if you look at past Cure records, or if you look at records that would come out later on, like Bloodflowers, Robert Smith has always been worried about getting older. And a large part of the reason why Robert Smith was worried about getting older was because he felt that even though he was approaching 30, he had never made any kind of masterpiece. And the reason this scared him was because he had observed that, in his eyes at least, most major works done by any kind of artist were done before they turned 30. In essence, if someone was going to make a masterpiece, they would do it before they entered their 4th decade. And so you have all these different factors. You have factors like the band's popularity, you have the impending doom of age, of course, 30, that's like, you're basically dead at that point. You have those things, and you also have the other typical Cure stuff like drugs thrown in there. There was some in-band fighting because of Lowell Tolhurst. Basically, at this point in time, there were 6 guys in the band. Lowell and Robert were the only 2 original members. And Lowell was one of Robert's boyhood friends. Lowell had initially played the drums, but he sucked, and so after Pornography, he switched to keys. But my understanding is that by this point in the band's career, by the time they were making Disintegration, 88, 89, basically he was just a drunken mess all the time. And so looking at things that way, there are obviously some very good things about where they were, for instance. So the band was successful. They weren't having to work other jobs in order to make a living. Robert Smith had also just gotten married. I think the story is that he and his wife waited to marry each other until they had known each other for longer than they hadn't known each other, and so they got married whenever they were like 28, 29, because I believe they met when they were 14. But it was during this time period that Robert Smith looked back to the previous albums The Cure had done, 17 Seconds, Faith, and Pornography especially. And so whenever they made this record, Robert Smith said that it was career suicide, basically. As I said, they were known for pop stuff, they were known for The Head on the Door and Kiss Me, Kiss Me, Kiss Me, but here they were making a record that was closer to Pornography than those 2 records. And Disintegration is a really depressing and dark album, and there are long songs on here. The longest song on here is over 9 minutes long. And I think that whenever you first put it on, like a lot of records, it's not immediately welcoming to you. There are tracks on here that are earworms, sure, Lovesong, Fascination Street, but a lot of the deeper album cuts are not exactly radio friendly. And so Robert Smith had this idea basically that he was going to make a masterpiece in the same vein as their earlier goth stuff, and it was going to bomb, and it was going to kill the band. And again, he didn't really like the band being as successful as they were, and so I think that he probably took a little bit of glee in the idea of committing career suicide. But you see, the plan accidentally backfired because what happened instead is they just blew up and they became bigger than ever. They were already kind of a big band, but by this point with Disintegration, they were playing stadiums. And so really with this album and with Wish Afterwards, we're entering The Cure's commercial peak. And really, seeing as how we're talking about Disintegration, it's also their critical peak. As I said, the band have never released an album that's topped this one. And I think it's doable, I think anything's possible, but I just think it's incredibly unlikely that they will ever top it. Disintegration is the second longest album by The Cure after Kiss Me, Kiss Me, Kiss Me. And I do think that this feels like a long record, and I think it drains you after you're done listening to it. But really, I don't think that's a bad thing necessarily. As I said, Robert Smith was kind of looking back to their older records. He was looking to records like Pornography for guidance on this one. He wanted to make something in the same vein as that, but the thing is that 7 years had passed. And so in the time between Pornography and Disintegration, the band had released Japanese Whispers, The Top, The Head on the Door, Kiss Me, Kiss Me, Kiss Me, and Robert Smith had played on a couple other records, the Glove album and the Susie and the Banshees record. And in addition to that, they had played who knows how many live dates, they had had so many more life experiences. Faith and Pornography were made by 3 pieces, and at this point in time, the band was a 6-piece. And really, every member of the band was incredibly skilled in their own right. And so as I talked about in my videos for them, I love 17 Seconds and I love Faith and I love Pornography. I think that's a brilliant record. But at the same time, Disintegration is so much more than those records. There's just a lot more going on. Whereas a record like 17 Seconds feels very sparse and very minimalistic, Disintegration is the exact opposite. It's very maximalistic. On every track, there's just so much detail, there are so many different beautiful sounds to hear, and really you can tell that this is an album that the band worked incredibly hard on. They didn't just go into the studio and record some songs they'd already written, which I think is a fine way to go about things, but rather you can tell they sat and they tinkered and they messed with effects and they did all these different things. Whenever I listen to this album, whenever I listen to Disintegration, it feels almost like it has like a day and night cycle to it. Because I do think that even though Disintegration is often viewed as like one of the most depressing albums ever, you know, whatever, I think that in spite of that, there are still an incredible amount of beautiful sounds, and I think especially in the first half. Really, for me, the true darkness of this record doesn't start showing its head until about the halfway mark. And so with that, I guess we'll jump into the record proper, starting with track 1, Plainsong. Plainsong is a very atmospheric, beautiful, lush song. I had the opportunity to see the band live about 2 years ago, and they played this song, and I leaned over to my buddy and I said that it felt like music to fall asleep to almost, and I meant that in the best way possible. I don't mean to say that it was boring, but rather Plainsong sounds heavenly. It's absolutely lush and it's gorgeous, and if you're not paying attention, then the lyrics can kind of escape from you. Because really, this is a song about getting older and dying and aging. I think I'm old and I'm feeling pain, you said, and it's all running out like it's the end of the world, you said. And it's so cold, it's like the cold if you were dead, and then you smiled for a second. Sometimes you make me feel like I'm living at the edge of the world. And so really, as I said, this is a song about dying and getting older. But I think that the music works in a really interesting way with the words. Like I said, the music sounds kind of heavenly. It's really beautiful and gorgeous sounding. And so I think it kind of strikes me as a sort of peaceful passing on almost. But still, I think there's a certain amount of anxiety and fear to be found in the lyrics. I mean, if a loved one told you that it feels like the end of the world, that's not good. That's not something you want to hear. And like I said, it almost feels to me like there's this sort of day and night thing going on with this album. And I'm not saying that I'm right. I'm not saying that the band intended for this to happen. I'm just saying this is what I think of. And so whenever I hear this song, it sounds to me like a chilly morning almost. And I think that just as the days loop, I feel like the album sort of loops in that way. And so I feel like the first song and the last song, Untitled, are actually kind of closely linked. And so with that, we'll head on to track 2, Pictures of You. Pictures of You is really kind of a nostalgic post-punk sort of song, and it's really a love song, because that's what Robert Smith does, is he writes love songs. But of course, this is a depressing album, and so there's a twist, right? And so it feels to me to be more about lost love. I've been looking so long at these pictures of you that I almost believe that they're real. Remembering you stand quiet in the rain as I ran to your heart to be near, and we kissed as the sky fell in, holding you close, how I always held close in your fear. And then the second verse is the part I always think of. Remembering you were running soft through the night, you were bigger and brighter and whiter than snow, and screamed at the make-believe, screamed at the sky, and you finally found all your courage to let it all go. This has never occurred to me, but I do wonder if that's a line about like yelling to God, or yelling at God rather. Remembering you fallen into my arms, crying for the death of your heart. You were stone white, so delicate, lost in the cold, you were always so lost in the dark. And so you have these lyrics here making it sound like the person the narrator speaks about is actually dead. Remembering how you used to be, slow drown, you were angels, so much more than everything. Hold for the last time, then slip away quietly. Open my eyes, but I never see anything. And so some of these lyrics, slow drowned and crying for the death of your heart, that makes it seem like the person the narrator is talking about is dead. But then towards the end of the song, it makes it sound like this person is not dead, only gone. If only I had thought of the right words, I could have held onto your heart. If only I'd thought of the right words, I wouldn't be breaking apart all my pictures of you. And that's something to make note of, basically, the idea of being unable to find the right words. That's a sort of motif that carries on throughout the album, and I think it's really important. In some ways, it actually reminds me of Kiss Me, Kiss Me, Kiss Me. It reminds me of the song How Beautiful You Are, which is basically just about how you are unable to truly see things as another sees them. And so in that same vein, just as it's impossible to truly know what's going on in someone else's head and to know what they're thinking, I think that there are times when it feels nearly impossible to put what you feel into words to explain to another person exactly what's going on in your head. And so while that song, How Beautiful You Are, seems to be focused more on the externality of things, Pictures of You is almost focused more on the internality of things. And I think that idea is so interesting, the idea of never being able to find the right words, because it's something that I struggle with, and it's something that I think everyone has struggled with, because everyone at one point or another has been involved in a discussion, an argument, a debate, and you think of what you should have said afterwards. And I think the thing is that that only really bothers you if like you lost or if something went poorly, because of course, even if you don't word things perfectly but you still get what you want, then like you kind of won. But if you lose someone, if you lose the love of your life seemingly, then you start questioning what you said, you start questioning whether or not there was something you could have done to keep them around. And then the song ends with these words: there was nothing in the world that I ever wanted more than to feel you deep in my heart. There was nothing in the world that I ever wanted more than to never feel the breaking apart all my pictures of you. For a little bit of backstory, some of the inspiration for this song came from whenever the band was recording this album. There was a fire in Robert's room, and I believe that the only thing he was able to save was a box of pictures of like him and his wife. And so that was part of the inspiration for this song. And also, if you look at the single artwork for this song, it's a picture of his wife getting ready. That same picture, I believe, was used on the Charlotte Sometimes single art, though it was a modified, changed up version of that picture. And so Pictures of You is another song that's like deeply reflective, and if you just read the lyrics on their own, they're quite heartbreaking and sad. But at the same time, the music is just so beautiful and dreamy. And so if you're not paying attention to the words, then it can seem quite cheery. And then I always think of the music video for this song where they're standing out in the snow. It's just something that always appears in my head. Track 3 is Closedown, and this is where I talk about the technical error that I mentioned earlier. Basically, on both this song, Closedown, and on Lovesong, there is a very high-pitched sound in both of these songs. It is a sound that most people can't hear because of the fact that most people are older. You see, whenever you're younger, you're able to pick up on the higher frequencies, and then whenever you're older, or if you have any kind of hearing loss, hearing damage, whatever, then it's harder for you to pick up on those same frequencies, and sometimes you just straight up can't even hear them. And so on Closedown and on Lovesong, there is just this high-pitched, like, it's super high-pitched, and it's there, and it's super annoying. And like I said, some people can hear it, some people can't. I played this song for my brother and asked him if he could hear it, and he was like, yes. And he made the observation that I think is probably right, that the band probably couldn't hear it just because their ears were probably shot from touring. I've done research into this, and I tried to find files of the original CD version, and this seems to have it as well. Because initially I thought it was like a remaster error, like whenever they remastered this album in 2010. I thought they made the mistake then, but really I think that I think it's just kind of something that's in the original recording. Weirdly enough though, if you listen to the 45 version of Lovesong on Spotify, you don't have that high-pitched, but it is present on Closedown, and that freaking sucks because Closedown is great. This was a track I didn't like for a long time, but a few years ago it really clicked whenever I realized that the drumming is very reminiscent of Pornography. And as I said, this album is very lush and it's very beautiful and there's a lot going on. And so because of that, I never fully understood the connections to Pornography that this album has. But then there are certain songs like Closedown and like Prayers for Rain, for instance, where the drum pattern just reminds me a lot of Pornography. Closedown starts off with the lyric, "I'm running out of time." This seems very familiar. This seems like a familiar theme. No, but in all seriousness, I very much relate to it. I very much relate to that idea of running out of time more than I wish I did. I'm running out of time, I'm out of step and closing down, and never sleep for wanting hours, the empty hours of greed, and uselessly always the need to feel again the real belief of something more than mockery. It's not immediately clear what this song is talking about in the same way that Pictures of You is, but I'll go ahead and take a stab at it. I really like the lyric, and never sleep for wanting hours, the empty hours of greed. The way I interpret that lyric, basically the empty hours of greed, I interpret that as just meaning that like you want to stay up because you feel like you have stuff to do, but then you stay up later and later and later, and really there's a point where you're just tired and you're not getting anything done. And it's something I struggle with. A couple nights ago, I did that exact same thing, basically, where I was like, okay, I'm going to stay up, I'm going to get some work done, and I will be productive because I know I'm running out of time because I'm aging and I'm getting older and I'm one day closer to death. And then the time comes and then you're just kind of tired and exhausted and you're not making the most of your time, and then that makes you feel worse because you know you're getting older, but you're not any better off for having stayed up later. Always the need to feel again the real belief of something more than mockery. I've talked about this a lot, but I think that whenever you do anything, especially whenever you're making art, I think there's a lot of self-doubt, and so I think that's what that line is about. It can be really hard and difficult to believe in yourself, and if you take this line into context with what I was saying about Robert Smith feeling the need to make a masterpiece, I think it's pretty clear how those things fit together. Because it's really easy to look at something that is a masterpiece. It's really easy to look at something that is perfection, like Disintegration, and to say, how could you have ever doubted yourself? But whenever you're in the midst of something, whenever you're actually doing something, you don't know how things are going to end up. And so as a result, I think self-doubt can creep in so easily. Closedown ends with the line, if only I could fill my heart with love. And I think this is in some ways a callback to Pictures of You. Pictures of You basically talks about losing someone, but it's also kind of a call forward to Lovesong. Lovesong is track 4 on the album. It's one of the band's biggest songs. Robert Smith has said before that people think of Disintegration as a pretty bleak album, but then they hit Lovesong and then they're like, I don't know. Or at least I think that's what he wants people to do. He wants people to second guess their ideas about Disintegration being a bleak, despairing album. And it makes sense because Lovesong was written as a wedding gift to his wife. And so he wrote this song for them, and then they put it on the album, and then it's been one of the band's biggest songs. Lovesong has actually always been my favorite of the Cure's popular songs, because really it's a song about trying to convey how you truly feel to someone. Whenever I'm alone with you, you make me feel like I am home again. Whenever I'm alone with you, you make me feel like I am whole again. Whenever I'm alone with you, you make me feel like I am young again. By the way, this was like a 28, 29-year-old singing this. Whenever I'm alone with you, you make me feel like I am fun again. And so basically it's just that idea of being so enthusiastic about someone, being so in love with them, that you feel giddy and happy and joyous. But I do think there's a certain darkness to Lovesong. Whenever I'm alone with you, you make me feel like I am free again. Whenever I'm alone with you, you make me feel like I am clean again. And the idea of being clean is something that pops up later on the album. It also strikes me as a callback to Pornography, specifically the ending lyric of that album. I must fight this sickness, I must find a cure, I must fight this sickness. There's that, and then there's also the lyric, whatever words I say, I will always love you. And so that's always struck me as kind of an odd lyric, because I'm like, what are you planning on saying mean things in the future? But maybe it just goes back to that idea presented in Pictures of You, basically the idea of feeling like you're unable to find the right words. Lovesong, I think, is a very simple and sincere declaration of love. I think there is some depth to it, and I think it's an absolutely beautiful song, but I don't think it's meant to be some kind of esoteric, strange whatever. Like I said, it was a love song written for his wife, and so I think that's exactly what this song is. But I do think that the context that Lovesong sits within makes it fit in kind of this depressing record. Plainsong was a song about a conversation wherein you're talking about them dying, essentially. Pictures of You is a song about lost love. Closedown is a song about feeling like you're running out of life. And songs like the title song of this record are incredibly heavy, and we'll touch on that in a bit. But all in all, even though Lovesong is one of the band's more popular tracks, I think that it does fit in with this record. I think that even though there's a certain degree of hope to it, I think that there's also a certain degree of fear and anxiety to it. Like these lyrics I pointed out, you make me feel like I am free again, you make me feel like I am clean again. That seems to imply that the narrator doesn't feel clean or free. These lyrics seem to imply that the narrator doesn't feel whole, that it doesn't feel young, doesn't feel fun. In essence, it kind of feels like the narrator feels like their life is awful, except for whenever they are with this one person. You can see it as beautiful, you can see it as depressing. Both are correct, I think. But really, this is an album about love, and so the next song, track 5, is Last Dance. Last Dance is a song that was actually axed from the original vinyl pressing of this album. It was one of the 2 songs that didn't make it to the record whenever they pressed it as a single disc, and honestly it's a massive loss. I actually really love this song. It's kind of weird, I feel like it's one of the more difficult tracks on the album to get into, but I think it's brilliant. I'm so glad you came, I'm so glad you remembered, to see how we're ending our last dance together. And so essentially the narrator is speaking about meeting up with someone who they once knew. I don't know if the idea of the last dance is literal or if it's metaphorical. I don't know if it's a euphemism, but regardless, this song is essentially talking about how people change. Things were different than whenever the narrator and the person he's talking to knew each other. There are all of these observations that this narrator makes about the woman he's speaking about, and all these observations are essentially showing how the woman has changed. Too punctual but prettier than ever, older than me now, more constant, more real, and the fur and the mouth and the innocence turned to hair and contentment that hangs in a basement. A woman now standing where once there was only a girl. Last Dance, I think, is obviously more of a goth song than some of the others on the record. And what I mean by that is that it's one of the less poppy tracks on the album. It doesn't have any kind of catchy melody or hook, but rather it's something I think that seeks to create sort of a dreary atmosphere. And like I was talking about earlier, there's this day-night cycle thing going on with the album in my eyes. And really, I think that if we're continuing with that idea, this is sort of the point on the album where the sun sets and things begin to go a little bit dark. And of course, I think there's this bittersweetness to the song. I'm so glad you came, I'm so glad you remembered, to see how we're ending our last dance together. And so the narrator is happy to see the woman who's standing in the place of a girl, but the thing is that he knows that it's their last time together. And so it echoes all of the kind of themes that we've talked about so far, the idea in Plainsong of it being the end of the world. It echoes the basis of Pictures of You, just the idea that you're losing someone. And this song is noteworthy because it's one of the many Cure songs to feature a reference to Christmas. Christmas falls late now, flatter and colder, never as bright as when we used to fall. And even if we drink, I don't think we would kiss in the way that we did when the woman was only a girl. In essence, it sounds to me a lot like the idea that you can never go home. You can reconnect with someone after years have passed, but you're not the same person and they're not the same person ever, and things are different. Even if things aren't necessarily worse, even if they're objectively better, things are different and they can never go back to what they once were. But yeah, Last Dance is one of those tracks that brings out the hopeless romantic in me. And I said this before about 9 Inch Nails and the Pretty Hate Machine video I did, but I think that The Cure is one of those bands where if you really, really love them, then it's because you emotionally resonate with some of their lyrics. And as I said with 9 Inch Nails, you can like The Cure and not care about their lyrics, but ultimately, I think that if you love the band and if you're crazy about them, it's because you connect with Robert Smith's lyrics in some way, shape, or form. And I think this song is a great example of that because honestly, the music is kind of weird, it's kind of strange and hard to get into, but it's Robert Smith's familiar themes and ideas that make you able to get into the track, I think. I think probably most people have had that experience before of reconnecting with someone who they haven't seen in a long time. And again, I think it's just a weird feeling. I think it's just a weird change whenever you realize that things have changed. And I think it connects back to that idea of aging and getting older as well. He sings about the time when the woman was only a girl, but if you were to flip that on its head, he's also in a way admitting that where he was once a boy, he is now a man. I also like that line towards the end, even if we drink, I don't think we would kiss in the way that we did when the woman was only a girl, because it implies a sort of loss of innocence, you know, which is a familiar theme. As you get older, things change and your opinions and thoughts and views of certain topics change. And I think this is an idea that goes back to faith. In the same way that album really focuses on the idea that the faith you once had is gone, with this song it's kind of the same thing, except it's with innocence instead of faith. Last Dance, I think, is a song that's overlooked by a lot of people. I don't know if it's too many people's favorites, but I have always loved it. I think it's great. Track 6 is Lullaby, which I believe was the first single released off this record. Robert Smith doesn't really sing too much on this track. He does more of a weird, creepy, whispery thing than anything else. And this is another song that whenever I hear it, I think about the video. I think of Robert Smith in pajamas as he slowly transforms into the Spider-Man. Also in the video, there's a part where it shows these dudes playing horns, but really on the record, that part that they're playing is played by the synthesizer, I think. So that's kind of funny. And I think this song probably can be interpreted as being about drug withdrawal, but really on the surface at least, it feels more like a German fable. It feels almost like a Hans and Gretel type story, something that you would tell kids to make them go to sleep. Basically, Robert Smith talks about the Spider-Man having him for dinner tonight. His arms are all around me and his tongue in my eyes. Be still, be calm, be quiet now, my precious boy. Don't struggle like that, or I will only love you more. For it's much too late to get away or turn on the light. The Spider-Man is having you for dinner tonight. And I suppose that this song also could be interpreted as being about sleep paralysis, which makes a lot of sense to me. Just the idea that you're laying in bed, but then you see this weird shadowy shape, this Spider-Man. And then the final bit of the song says, and I feel like I'm being eaten by 1,000 million shivering furry holes, and I know that in the morning I will wake up in the shivering cold. And the Spider-Man is always hungry. So my understanding of this basically is that he thinks he's being eaten by the Spider-Man and he feels like it, but he knows that in the morning he'll wake up and be fine. But he also knows that this Spider-Man figure will return. And so this song doesn't really fit in too much with the themes that we've discussed already. It doesn't really fit in with like aging or lost love, but it does kind of speak to a certain kind of anxiety surrounding nightmares. Or again, I think it could be about drug withdrawal because that's a lot of Cure songs, honestly. Lullaby is one of those songs that it took me a long time to actually get into, but at this point, I love it. I think it's phenomenal. Like I said, it was a single on this record, and it's one of the few, like, poppier tracks on this record, I guess. Despite its subject matter, despite the fact that it's about being eaten alive, I still think that the song is something that is more fit for radio play than a lot of other tracks. Track 7 is Fascination Street, which has one of the best bass riffs I've ever heard. It's another goth staple. I think it's just a song that is infinitely danceable and enjoyable. If I'm not mistaken, and if you don't mind me taking away some of the mystery of this song, I believe that Fascination Street was a real street, and I believe this song is just about the idea of getting ready for a night out on the town. And so there are certain songs where it's like that, or Battery by Metallica is also like that, where Battery is literally the name of a street. And so I don't know, that's always been kind of goofy to me, the idea where you're just writing a song about like going out. Like, like it doesn't really feel like there's all that much to it. But still, this is Robert Smith writing, and so there are some really interesting lyrics. Let's cut the conversation and get out for a bit, because I feel it all fading and paling, and I'm begging to drag you down with me, to kick the last nail in. That description right there, because I feel it all fading and paling, to me that sounds a lot like drug use. And the idea that I'm begging to drag you down with me is kind of a crazy thing to say to someone. I think it speaks a lot to this idea of like self-destruction, but also not wanting to only destroy yourself, but like not wanting to be alone as you do it. I like you in that, like I like you to scream, but if you open your mouth, then I can't be responsible for quite what goes in or to care what comes out. So just pull on your hair, just pull on your pout, and let's move to the beat like we know that it's over. And right there, the idea that we know that it's over, it's sort of like a Nine Inch Nails, this wasn't meant to last type thing. Again, I think it kind of speaks to the carelessness of partying, but also the lyrics, if you open your mouth, then I can't be responsible for quite what goes in or to care what comes out. Those are words that actually feel really mean to me, because it feels like the narrator is encouraging someone to come, let me drag you down with me, but at the same time, if you speak, if you say anything, I don't really care. And so it's kind of mean. I'm interpreting this song as being about self-destructive tendencies, but if you have a different interpretation, I would love to hear it. I will note though, I always misheard this lyric for a long time, the idea that if you open your mouth, then I can't be responsible for quite what goes in or to care what comes out. I always thought it said I can't be responsible for quite what goes in or to kill what comes out. And this song comes immediately after following Lullaby, which sings about a Spider-Man, so I thought, I was thinking of some kind of horrible spider creatures coming out of someone's mouth. But if I'm being completely honest, I do kind of like my misheard lyric better, but I mean both are quality. And then of course the lyrics where it talks about pulling on your hair, your pout, pull on your face, pull on your feet, I think that's just referring to getting dressed. In essence, it's saying like do your hair, do your makeup, put on your shoes and boots. And again, the track is talking about hitting Fascination Street up, and it kind of has that forward momentum. As I said, the track has a really groovy, bouncy bass line, and I think it's actually one of the more intense songs that The Cure has written, just in terms of vibe and atmosphere and whatever. It just has that intense quality to it, I think. And so as I was talking about, I feel like this album has sort of a day and night cycle to it, and I feel like we are squarely in the nighttime. And so if you're listening to this album on vinyl, as it's actually pressed now, not the 1-disc version that initially came out, but the 2-disc double album version. If you're listening to that, then this is the last track of side B, and so that means it's the last song of disc 1. And so at this point, if you were listening to the vinyl record, of course you would take out disc 2 and put it on your turntable, and disc 2 on the whole is a much darker piece of music than disc 1, I think. And so as I was saying, I feel like there are some brighter, I feel like there are some cheerier tracks on this record. I think tracks like Pictures of You and Plainsong are really gorgeous and beautiful, even if the subject matter is a little heavy. But I think that starting with this next song, I think this is really, really where it becomes clear that you're listening to a piece of music, to an album that is not happy. And so with that, let's talk about Prayers for Rain. So as I was saying, I feel like Prayers for Rain is where the album becomes a lot more darker than it has been previously. And I think you can really tell that just by listening to the instrumental of this track, because it is kind of slow and drudges along. The drums on Prayers for Rain, I think, sound very tribal, and so because of that, they remind me a lot of Pornography, as I was talking about earlier with Closedown. I've always loved Robert Smith's delivery on this track. You shatter me, your grip on me, a hold on me so dull it kills. You stifle me, infectious sense of hopelessness in Prayers for Rain. I suffocate, I breathe in dirt, and nowhere shines but desolate. And drab the hours all spent on killing time again, all waiting for the rain. And so in essence, I feel like this song is just about being miserable. The narrator is obviously speaking about someone having a hold on him, and that's never a good feeling whenever you feel like you are being controlled or restrained in some way. Really what this song reminds me of is, it reminds me of that feeling that sometimes I'll get late at night. And I know I'm not the only one who has this happen, but late at night, do you ever just question everything about your life and you just feel absolutely miserable and horrible? I find that like late at night, like after midnight, is when I typically enter my most depressive moods. And again, I think there's something about being alone in the dead of night that just causes not everyone to feel this way, but a lot of people to feel this way. I've seen memes about this, and so I know that it's not only me who experiences this. But really, the next few tracks of the album feel like that time to me. The next few tracks on the album to me just feel like everything is wrong. And again, it's just that sense of everything being broken and feeling that it cannot be repaired. It's that sense of being trapped. I deteriorate, I live in dirt, and nowhere glows but drearily and tired the hours all spent on killing time again, all waiting for the rain. That idea, on killing time again, all waiting for the rain, that almost sounds to me like he's waiting for death. Or at the very least, if he's not waiting on death, he's waiting on change. And I think this is actually a callback to Closedown. Closedown talks about the idea that I'm out of step and closing down and never sleep for wanting hours, the empty hours of greed. And then of course, as I just said, on Prayers for Rain, you have the idea, the hours all spent on killing time again, all waiting for the rain. So you basically just have this idea of wasting time, this idea of wasting your life away. And as we've talked about, you also have the idea of aging built into this. And so not only does the narrator feel like he's getting older, not only does he feel like he's losing time and losing parts of his life, he feels like he's wasting the parts of his life that he's getting. And so really this is a track that kind of feels to me, it's like that idea, like, would I be better dead? It's like one of those sorts of like miserable suicidal tracks, basically. So Prayers for Rain is all about praying for rain, and so that track ends, and then the beginning of the next one, The Same Deep Water as You, which we're going to be talking about now, it starts with rain sounds. And so I've always loved that connection because it is kind of obvious, but at the same time it acknowledges that the prayers for rain, the wish, the request has been granted. And so it feels to me like things are getting worse, basically. The narrator wanted rain, and he got it. Kiss me goodbye, pushing out before I sleep. Can't you see I try? Swimming the same deep water as you is hard. And so there again, you have the idea of sleep, of losing sleep, of getting pushed out of sleep. And then that third line, can't you see I try? That's always felt so heartfelt and meaningful to me. It's like a pleading sort of thing. Like, can't you see how hard I'm trying to do whatever it is? And this is a song about a kiss, basically, and it's a song about trying to be together with someone. Kiss me goodbye, bow your head and join with me. In face pushed deep, reflections meet, the strangest twist upon your lips. And disappear, the ripples clear, and laughing break against your feet. And laughing, break the mere sweet. So we shall be together. The very last thing before I go, I will kiss you, I will kiss you, I will kiss you forever on nights like this. I will kiss you, and we shall be together. This song seems to go back to Lovesong for me, I think. Just the idea that you're miserable without someone, but whenever you're with them, everything is beautiful. And so in that way, I think you can maybe view the song as being about a codependent relationship. This song is 9 minutes long, it's over 9 minutes long, and so at this point in time, it was the longest song The Cure had ever recorded, aside from like improvised versions and extended tracks and stuff like that. But certainly this is the longest song on any Cure studio album up to this point. And this is another song that is not fit for radio whatsoever. As I said, it's 9 minutes long, and it's also kind of a slow song. It's something that really takes its time. And so The Same Deep Water as You, to me, it just feels like a very miserable song. It's about like trying and failing, I think. Specifically, that lyric, swimming the same deep water as you is hard. And what exactly is this metaphorical same deep water? I don't really know. It could be seen as talking about death. I think that it could just be a way of saying that you can't follow someone in the path that they're taking. But really, Prayers for Rain was about wanting the rain to come, and then it comes, and then the narrator can't stand it. The narrator can't keep up. It's hard. And so I suppose that in that sense, the song could be about the idea that be careful what you wish for. But this song ends with the idea, I will kiss you forever in nights like this, I will kiss you, and we shall be together. Basically, it feels like there's this idea that the narrator thinks that if he's with a certain person, then he'll be okay, he'll be fine, things will work out. But as we see in the next track, that maybe isn't the case. Next up, we have the title track of the album, Disintegration, which is the first track on side D of the vinyl record. And if you're looking at it, the lyrics to this song are actually longer than any other track on the album. This song has a crazy catchy bass line, and a very quick story about this album and about this song. The very first time I heard this album, I was reading Watchmen for the very first time. Watchmen is brilliant, everyone knows it, everyone calls it the greatest comic of all time, and the thing is that I want to be like, well actually, no, but like, I can't think of anything that's better than Watchmen. I can think of stuff that's just as influential or on the same level as Watchmen, but I can't think of anything that like obviously surpasses it. And so Watchmen takes place in the 80s, and I think it dropped in like 1986, 1987. And so it came out about the same time period as this album, and so the very first time I put on this album, it was while reading that comic for the first time. And for a long time afterwards, I could not listen to this song specifically. I could not listen to the title track of Disintegration without thinking about Watchmen, which, all things considered, there are worse things to think about. But Disintegration, as the title implies, is about everything falling apart. The same Deep Water, as I mentioned, ends with this idea that I will kiss you and we will be together, but then Disintegration immediately opens up with the line, oh, I miss the kiss of treachery, the shameless kiss of vanity. And so in the previous song, a kiss is shown to be representative of eternal love, but then in this song, it feels like the kiss as a symbol has kind of transformed into something negative. It reminds me a lot of the kiss off Kiss Me, Kiss Me, Kiss Me. On that track, he sings about the idea of someone's tongue being like poison, and so it feels like more of the same on this track. Also, I feel like the lyrics to this song were written in a very stream of consciousness manner, and so I think there's a lot of really rich symbolism in here, but I don't know if it's all completely obvious because of the fact that like lines just kind of run together. The soft and the black and the velvety uptight against the side of me, and mouth and eyes and heart all bleed and run in thickening streams of greed. As bit by bit it starts the need to just let it go, my party piece. I'm not completely sure how to interpret these lines aside from it feels to me about being trapped in a relationship, but also like wanting it and wanting more. Mouth and eyes and heart all bleed and run in thickening streams of greed. I think that's just about lust. The next verse again says, I miss the kiss of treachery, the aching kiss before I feed, the stench of a love for a younger meat, and the sound that it makes when it cuts in deep. The stench of a love for a younger meat, I think you could probably interpret that as being about lusting for someone younger than the person you're with, or even if not younger, than someone different. The holding up on bended knees, the addiction of duplicities. As bit by bit it starts the need to just let go my party piece. And then here's where the betrayal seems to manifest. But I never said I would stay to the end, so I leave you with babies and hoping for frequency. Screaming like this in the hope of secrecy, screaming me over and over and over, I leave you with photographs, pictures of trickery, stains on the carpet and stains on the scenery, songs about happiness murmured in dreams, when we both us knew how the ending would be. And so there once again you have the idea of a relationship breaking up, of things falling apart. That idea, I never said I would stay to the end, so I leave you with babies and hoping for frequency, is that's quite something. Basically the idea that I'm not going to stick around, so here you're left with these kids or whatever. Songs about happiness murmured in dreams goes back to the idea of sleep, as mentioned before, goes back to the idea of the Spider-Man. That line about I leave you with photographs, pictures of trickery, stains on the carpet and stains on the scenery, I see that as being a line about memories essentially. There are times in life when things can seem good, and then you find out things about what really happened, and then those memories are stained, basically. So it's all come back around to breaking apart again, breaking apart like I'm made up of glass again. Here you have a bit of paranoia, making it up behind my back again, holding my breath for the fear of sleep again. And there you have fear of nightmares, fear of sleep. Obviously he says fear of sleep, but I don't think it's just sleep, I think it's dreams, but also if someone is scared to sleep, then they're scared of what's going to happen whenever they're not paying attention. Holding it up behind my head again, cut in deep to the heart of the bone again. Round and round and round, and it's coming apart again, over and over and over. I think paranoia can also be a killer in relationships. There is such a thing as self-sabotaging and suspecting something where there's nothing going on. And then towards the end you have this verse, and it is my favorite verse in the song. Now that I know I'm breaking to pieces, I'll pull out my heart and feed it to anyone. Crying for sympathy, crocodiles cry for the love of the crowd and the 3 cheers from everyone. Dropping through sky, through the glass of the roof, through the roof of your mouth, through the mouth of your eye, through the eye of the needle, it's easier for me to get closer to heaven than ever feel whole again. This verse, more than any of the other verses, it kind of feels like a mental breakdown. It feels very stream of consciousness, like I said. That idea that I'll pull out my heart and feed it to anyone, to me, that seems to be about the idea that basically you're just looking for love and approval, and you don't really care who's giving it to you. You'll give up yourself to anyone. Crocodile's cry, I think, refers to the idea of crocodile tears. And then the lines about dropping through things, dropping through sky, through the glass of the roof, through the roof of your mouth, through the mouth of your eye, through the eye of the needle. I don't really know what to make of those lyrics up until the very end, through the eye of the needle. Lots of people think that the needle referenced is a reference to drugs. I think it's a reference to the Bible, actually. Jesus is quoted as saying that it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to get into heaven. And the following lyrics directly connect back to that idea of heaven. It's easier for me to get closer to heaven than ever feel whole again. It connects back to those lyrics. I must fight this sickness. I must find a cure. But again, this album came out 7 years after Pornography, and to me it indicates that things have not necessarily improved. I never said I would stay to the end. I knew I would leave you with babies and everything. Screaming like this in the whole of sincerity, screaming me over and over and over. And here he repeats some previous lyrics. I leave you with photographs, pictures of trickery, stains on the carpet and stains on the memory. Songs about happiness murmured in dreams when we both of us knew how the end always is. And so this song is called Disintegration, and I think it's about exactly that. I think it's about the narrator's personal life completely falling apart, but I think at least part of the reason why it's falling apart is due to an unwillingness to commit. The idea of telling someone I never said I would stay till the end seems to imply that you didn't really care all that much about the life that you built up. But the thing is that, you know, in the lyrics, the narrator is seeming to have like a mental breakdown almost. That's kind of what it reads as to me. And so I suppose that it goes back to that idea that you don't know what you have till you don't have it anymore. It's that idea that you only appreciate what you've lost after you've lost it. Here we've reached the penultimate track on the record, Homesick. Homesick may be my favorite Cure song, period. The Figurehead is also up there, but Homesick I think is absolutely gorgeous. It's absolutely beautiful and it just rips my heart apart. There are just a lot of really beautiful, more classical instruments on this one. There's a lot of piano on this song. There's some violin, though I don't know if it's a real violin or if it's like a keyboard effect. At about the 3-minute mark, there's this very, very low bass sound that is just so heavy. And so it adds just a lot of weight and emphasis to the track. I think it takes like 4 minutes before the vocals kick into this track. And so as I was saying earlier, going back to this day and night cycle, Homesick is we're reaching the end of the night almost. At this point in my mind, at least, we're reaching dawn. We're not quite there yet, but we're getting there. And Robert Smith's vocal performance is interesting because it feels almost like a spoken word performance as opposed to just straight singing it. He makes his voice sound very low, and it's something that he only does on a handful of other Cure tracks. The only other one that's coming to mind right now is Club America off of Wild Mood Swings. I think the deepness and the richness of his voice on this track causes him to just feel really tired. It feels like his mind is sluggish almost. And so it's slowed down a lot from Disintegration, where Disintegration felt like the narrator's mind was racing, but Homesick, things are slower basically. And it feels like we're reaching the end of things. Hey, hey, just one more and I'll walk away. All the everything you win turns to nothing today. The idea that all the everything you win turns to nothing today can be interpreted as a gambling metaphor, but you can also see it as just being about the idea that everything dies. Everything fades away, and things that you love, everything you love will one day be gone. And I forget how to move when my mouth is this dry and my eyes are bursting hearts in a blood-stained sky. I think that's probably about being physically affected and tired after drug use. Oh, it was sweet, it was wild, and oh, how we... And he trails off there. I trembled, stuck in honey clinging to me. So just one more go, inspire in me the desire in me to never go home. And again, this is like just, for me, it's the most heartbreaking track on the album. It's the kind of song that I can't do justice just by talking about it. So really, like, go and listen to it if you're not familiar with it. As I said, Lowell Tolhurst wasn't really doing much in the band at this point in time, but the other band members besides Robert Smith knew that Lowell he'd felt left out. And so as a result, they took one of his demos, which was the demo for Homesick, and they reworked it a bunch, and so that's how we have this song, pretty much. I think it was Simon Gallup and Roger O'Donnell who worked on this one a lot. But that's really basically the story, was that Robert Smith didn't even like this song at first because it was something that Lowell had written, and his relationship with Lowell was just horrible at the time. But no, Homesick is, like I said, it's my favorite song on the record. And the lyrics at the end of the song repeat, oh, just one more and I'll walk away. All the everything you win turns to nothing today. So just one more go, inspire in me the desire in me to never go home. I really like the idea of like wanting just one more, whatever it is. It really does kind of feel like something an addict would say, you know, just one more hit and I'm done forever. But the thing is that that's not really how things work, because one more leads to another and leads to another and so on and so on. But again, all the everything you win turns to nothing today. Or in other words, I guess it has disintegrated, so. The final track on the album is Untitled. If you buy into my idea about Disintegration essentially being a day, then at this point, for the final track on the album, we've looped back around to where we were with Plainsong in the early morning. I think that this song is actually really freeing and liberating, especially if you've listened to it after listening to the record in order, after hearing Praise for Rain, The Same Deep Water as You, Disintegration, and Homesick. There's a certain catharsis to this song, but even though it does feel cathartic, there's still a great sadness to it. It seems to me to be about finally letting go of someone. Hopelessly drift in the eyes of the ghost again, down on my knees and my hands in the air again, pushing my face in the memory of you again, but I never know if it's real. Never know how I wanted to feel. And here we go back to pictures of you, basically. Never quite said what I wanted to say to you, never quite managed the words to explain to you, never quite knew how to make them believable, and now the time has gone, another time undone. And this idea that you feel like you haven't said the right words is all the more heartbreaking whenever you consider it within the full context of the record. Like look at this, look at all these words that have been said. And these are some freaking beautiful words, a lot of thought and effort were put into these lyrics. But it feels like in the end, the narrator still feels like he hasn't said quite what he wanted to say. Hopelessly fighting the devil, futility, feeling the monster climb deeper inside of me, feeling him gnawing my heart away hungrily, I'll never lose this pain, never dream of you again. And of course that idea, never dream of you again, there is that reference to sleep. But is the idea that I'll never dream of you again, is that acknowledging that you'll focus on other things, or just that you'll never sleep again? Within the full context of this record, I think it's probably the latter. And so I do think, like I said, this song is a bit cathartic, but I think that, you know, it's dark, it's depressing, it's a sad ending. There is no like Hollywood fairy tale ending to this album. It's an album about love, I think, but more than that, it's an album about recalling the love that you once had that you no longer have. I think more than anything else, this is an introspective album wondering about how you fit into things, especially how you fit into relationships with other people and how you fit into your dreams. And it's about wondering how your dreams fit in with you. This is an album about trying to make sense of memories, of trying to make sense of things that have lost, people who are gone. It's an album about trying to make sense of all these feelings that you have inside of you that you can't quite put into words. And really, I think that Disintegration, more than anything else, is an album about learning to let go. It's a heartbreaking record. It's a beautiful masterpiece. And like I said, I think anything's possible. I think that Robert Smith and The Cure, especially after Songs of a Lost World, I think that they certainly have some gas left in the tank. And so I think they can make more great stuff. And so I do think it is possible for them to release a record better than Disintegration, but I just don't think it will happen. And the reason why is because Disintegration is just so special. It's just such a beautiful record, and it's a long record, you know, it's like 72 minutes, but at the same time, I wouldn't cut any of it. As I said towards the beginning, it feels like a record that is fully formed. I think every song on the record is needed, but yeah, Disintegration is a masterpiece, and I think at this point in time, I think it's my favorite record of all time. Before we go, we'll talk about the B-sides for a bit. So the B-sides are freaking fantastic. I talked about this earlier, but I think that there are certain Cure albums that would have benefited from alternate track listings. I think Three Imaginary Boys should have had a different track listing. I think Wish probably should have had a different track listing. I think with Kiss Me, Kiss Me, Kiss Me, there are certain songs that probably should have made it onto the record. I'm thinking of To the Sky in particular. But with this album, I have no gripes about the track list, and I think that they chose the right songs, basically. But like I said, all the B-sides are freaking great. Babel is a really interesting one. It's really deranged. It's very strange. There are a lot of crazy sound effects going on. Too Late is probably my least favorite of the Disintegration B-sides, but it's still a really solid track. It's just very upbeat. And you can tell it was written whenever they hadn't quite decided how dark the album was going to be. Out of Mind is a weird one. It's kind of a weird poppy track, but I really dig it. I think it would have fit in really nicely with The Head on the Door. On the deluxe edition on this album that came out like 15 years ago, there are some demos. No Heart is really good. Eston is super catchy. Pirate Ships is a very nice song. It's a really good cover. And my favorite B-side from these sessions is Fear of Ghosts. It's a very creepy sounding song. It's very weird. I think it's very dark sounding even for Disintegration, so I don't know that it quite fit in with the rest of the album. It's a different kind of darkness, I think. But yeah, it's one of my favorite Cure songs. I think it's freaking phenomenal. And I want to go ahead and talk about it, but I'm not going to. And the reason why is because I think that I have a lot to say about it, and so for that reason I'm just going to do a separate video. Basically, I wanted to talk about that idea that Robert Smith sings about in that song. The farther away I get from things that I care about, the less I care about how much further away I get, which in a lot of ways is basically talking about the idea out of sight, out of mind, but it goes deeper than that, and I think it kind of goes to show that the farther you go away from certain people or places you love, the more you change as a person into someone who you maybe don't recognize. And so I love that song. I will talk about it more at a later date though. On the Mixed Up album, there are some really good remixes I like. I like the Fascination Street and Lovesong extended versions. I think both of those songs are incredible already, and I think making them longer doesn't hurt them in any way, shape, or form. So The Cure concluded the 80s with their best record. What a feat, what a feat, what a decade for the band, honestly. They did so much great work in the 80s that it's honestly insane. It's really difficult to think of another band or artist that put out that much great work in that short of a period, aside from like David Bowie or someone, because Bowie had a string of incredible albums in the 70s, obviously. But for recommendations, I will recommend the Silent Hill 2 soundtrack. I love Silent Hill 2, I think it's a great game, so if you are into games, play it, but especially listen to the soundtrack. Even though the soundtrack is entirely instrumental, I think that it has a lot of very beautiful love songs on there. Lovesong specifically is one of my favorites. I think it's super underrated. And then the two bigger ones are Promise and Theme of Laura. But yeah, that record's awesome. And again, it's a soundtrack to a video game from 2001, but just as a work of music, it really stands on its own. I would also recommend Kate Bush's Hounds of Love. Running Up That Hill gained some popularity because of Stranger Things, but I think that if you like this album, you'll also like that one. Robert Smith likes Kate Bush as well, so I think that he would probably approve that recommendation. If you're looking for tales of lost love and that sort of thing, reflective pieces, then I think you could really get into the works of Arthur Rimbaud. If you're looking for more gothic stories about lost love, I think you could get into Frankenstein. Lullaby makes me think of The Metamorphosis by Kafka, which is worth checking out. If you're looking for more gothic stories about love, The Bloody Chamber by Angela Carter is really great, but we're getting a little bit away from the original record, I think. I would also recommend Still by Nine Inch Nails, particularly if you prefer some of the more instrumental passages in this record. You know, there are no tracks that are entirely instrumental, but you do have long stretches of the album, you know, like 5 minutes at a time where there are no words. So if you like Homesick specifically, I would recommend this album. This album's a freaking banger. I would recommend Watchmen, because I read Watchmen for the first time when listening to this album for the first time, so, you know, I gotta throw it in there. I would recommend Like Clockwork by Queens of the Stone Age. I think that has a lot of sadder, more reflective tracks on there. I really love it. It's my favorite album by them. The Fragile by Nine Inch Nails is also worth checking out if you can handle some harder rock stuff. But the instrumental tracks kind of remind me of this album, just like You Imagined or L'Amour. And so with that, I don't see anything around my room to recommend. Thank you for watching. Let me know what you think about Disintegration. If you have a favorite Cure record that is not Disintegration or Pornography, let me know, because honestly, that's kind of crazy. So I would be interested in hearing why. Because people who love Pornography and who think it's the best Cure record, I freaking get it. I get it so much, dude. But like, Disintegration for me tops everything. So thank you for watching. Have a nice night, and goodbye.